Oh, I love it when things work.
It's helped.
Welcome, everybody. Uh, this is Vinny. As most of you know, I'm the director of Fortify Coaching and also have the privilege of hosting the Fortify webinar. And I happen to have the privilege of being with coach and group leader Les, who I have known now. I think I'm going on about a decade. Les?
Probably longer than either one of us really want to remember.
Exactly. I think some of our users have were born before the period of time that we've known each other.
Very possible.
But you bring some terrific wisdom and knowledge and skill. And that's one of the reasons we were compelled to insist that you participate in this webinar because you've got tools and you got skills, Les. Um, I want to both at the beginning, at the end, remind our users of just a couple of upcoming things. Next week, we will have Coach Holly and I will be doing the Fortified Chat. And following that, we're going right into our June webinar because of some scheduling opportunities. We're going to test a new webinar time, which will be next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Our guest will be Raisha Ismail from Christchurch, New Zealand, who was actually our February webinar, but we had a couple of issues that made the rebroadcast of that impossible. So we got a redo, and that'll be again next Wednesday at 7 p.m. And we'll be very interested to see if a change in time makes it possible for more to attend live. We still have plenty of our members watch the webinars on the replay, but we'd also like to encourage a little more live participation. So welcome everybody, and welcome Les. Les, how in the world did you find yourself in this space? You're now a great group leader. I've talked to members of your group and they love you. And I've talked to some of those that you coach. They have similar feelings. How'd you get here?
Oh, man. I don't think we have enough time to tell the whole story, Vinny. But briefly, so I, like many people, was exposed at a very young age to pornography. I think I was 10 or 11. And in those days, it was print. We didn't have computers. We didn't have internet. We didn't have those things. It was a picture out of a men's magazine, I guess we would call it. And it was, I can still see that image. I mean, it was emblazoned on my memory, and it became a problem from that moment on. I struggled. Well, I say I struggled. I had this problem for many, many years. There were times in which I tried to not do it, but I never really sought out recovery, to be honest and transparent, until much later in life when events conspired to force me to seek out recovery. So I was not one who had the courage to admit that I had a problem and ask for help. I had to be one of those that was caught and found out and subsequently ended up being told to go get help. And I'm glad that happened because it led me to two things. It led me to Candeo, which is a predecessor organization, I guess. It's now folded in with Fortified, and and it also led me to a religious-based 12-step program, and I began both of those pretty much simultaneously. So I was going to a 12-step group each week and talking about the 12 steps of recovery. And like I said, it was a religious-based group, so it was pretty specific towards repentance and reconciliation and the things that we need to do from a Christian perspective. I was also started on Candeo, going through the training and learning about the things to do. It's interesting because in both of those circumstances, when I began, I was sort of an unwilling participant.
I remember.
So I can remember, for example, the first time I posted in the Candeo community, which was probably about 6 months into the program for me. I was a lurker. I was one that I read the community. I listened. I learned. I even in group. When we started having groups, I was in your group, and I wasn't a real active participant for a little bit. And I think part of it was fear. Part of it was not wanting to put myself out there, such as we're doing today, which is still uncomfortable. But it took me a while, and I guess I felt like I needed to be at a certain place in my recovery before I was comfortable, kind of stepping out and saying, "Okay, here I am," and let's talk about this stuff.
I relate well to that feeling, and of course, a lot of our group members. You mentioned group, and it is a bit of a step to go from sort of knowing I have a problem to sharing it with others. But a lot of that fear is, I know I had the belief I'm the only guy in the world that has this problem. And one of the beauties of group, as you know, have been that we go there, we make an introduction, we share a little bit about ourselves, and all of a sudden we realize we're listening to 8 or 9 or 10 guys that have just shared the same story or very close to it. They could be in Tehran, they could be in Dublin, Ireland, could be here in Salt Lake City or in Texas, and we just shared the same problem. And it's as if there's a breath of relief. I'm not alone.
Absolutely. And that's part of the message I think that people need to understand, is that we're not alone, because this particular addiction tends to want to thrive in isolation and wants to not have connection and to not work with people. But yeah, speaking of groups, so I do 3 groups on Fortify, and I do a 12-step group. In fact, I did it last night. So in my groups, I have people from China, Thailand, Australia, Egypt, France, England, Sweden, Canada, and a bunch in the U.S. And the thing that I think is really great about group is we have a lot of cultural differences. We have religious differences. We have political differences. But we all have the same basic issue that we're trying to overcome: unwanted sexual behaviors and an addiction, or at least compulsive behaviors around pornography.
Yeah.
We have some great conversations. I learn from these guys every week.
I hear your about the 12 steps. And as you know, I had my actual beginning of recovery back in the late 90s, also began with 12 steps. But, particularly you and I are talking about the 12th step today. And I know you emphasize it. I emphasize it to those that I work with, that 12th step is really why you're here today. You're sharing your experience, your strength, and your hope, with the hope that maybe a little something will rub off and that they'll find a piece, maybe the whole, of things that work, things that get me extricated from the dark abyss that I find myself in. So I commend you, Les, and I say thank you. I love the title. We talked about this for a few minutes yesterday. I love the title of today's conversation. Why trying, hoping, or why hoping and wishing, and I added really, really trying. Why it doesn't work, and why we need a plan. Take it away.
I will. So before we launch into that, just one more comment about 12 steps, I guess, is, for those who aren't familiar with the 12 steps, the step 12, which is the final step, is service. And to me, the philosophy is, once you have walked that long, dark, lonely road of addiction, and you've had some help from other people, and you've made it to the end, to a place that's bright and light and freedom, you want to turn around and help others. And I think that's a natural inclination, and I think it's a very good thing. So that's what we're doing here today. Now, into this. So I don't want to minimize wishing or hoping or trying really hard. Those are very important factors. But the fact of the matter is, I spent decades wishing and hoping, and on some occasions trying really, really hard, and I occasionally found sobriety, but I did not find recovery, because there is a difference. So, when we come to this recovery effort. When we come to something like Fortify or Candeo before, most of us come with one tool in our toolbox, and that's this. My friend Josh says, white knuckle sobriety.
Yeah, that's what Josh said last month's
Right.
webinar.
And,
I love that.
and we need that. We do need that. That is a tool in our toolbox, but it's not sufficient. There are other things that we need to do. So I kind of wanted to start the conversation today around this subject with the question. So the question that I always ask people is, what are you willing to change? We sometimes, and I probably shouldn't date myself or age myself, but I'm going to. So there's an old Meatloaf song, right, that says, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. Sometimes we approach recovery that way. Well, I really want to recover. I really want to get this out of my life, but don't ask me to do that. Don't ask me whatever that is, right? So to me,
and we call that, I've heard that called conditional recovery.
yeah.
I'm willing to do a lot of things. I'm just not willing to do everything.
So what I suggest we do is we start very simply and very small. I'm a simple fella, as you know, I'm a simple man, and I don't like to get too complicated. So we're going to keep things simple here. We're going to use the KISS principle, which is keep it simple, stupid. For those who may not be familiar with it, it certainly applies to me. So what I like to suggest where people start is with what I call a healthy daily routine. And this may be a change for some people, maybe it's not for some people, but there are 4 areas in which we need to be as healthy as we can be and as balanced as we can be. And that's mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. And I believe firmly from my own experience that we need to have some activity in each of those 4 quadrants on a daily basis to help us be balanced and to help us be healthy. Because the fact is, when we're healthy, when we're feeling good, when we're feeling in balance, recovery is much easier. So I suggest people do some things like make sure you get enough rest. And I can hear all the young people already saying, here's this old man telling me I got to go to bed. And I'm not telling you have to do anything. I'm suggesting that we need to get enough rest. We need to get some exercise. Now, you can tell from looking at me, I'm not an exercise nut by any means, but physical activity. We need to eat right. We need to do some recovery work every day. We need to have accountability. And there are a lot of things that we can add to those things that will touch on each of these quadrants, such as, reading, music, connection, gratitude. We talked about groups and coaching, things like that are good. Meditation, prayer, reading scriptures or holy books if you're a religious person. These are all things that are important. Now, I just get a pretty big list, and probably the odds of doing all those in any given day are pretty slim for most of us. So what I suggest is find something that works for you and find the right amount of time. So if you can do a half hour in the morning, let's just say 30 minutes in the morning. So, you get up and you eat some breakfast, and maybe you log on to Fortify and you spend 5 minutes looking at the community. Maybe you watch a video for 5 minutes. Maybe you do some meditation for 10 minutes to get yourself centered and ready to go, and then you're off to work. Or maybe you have time to take a short walk or a bike ride. So again, whatever works, but to start your day off good is a great thing. Also, to end the day good is another thing. So I talk about bookending or bracketing the day. Let's try to start off as good and positive as you can, but let's end that way as well. The thing that's really important about ending the day, I think, is accountability. Accountability to ourselves, and accountability to others, allies, accountability partners, whoever that may be. But really being honest with ourselves and looking at the day and saying, how did I do today? How was today? Was it a good day? Was it a bad day? If it was a bad day, what can I do to make tomorrow better? If it was a good day, how do I reinforce that positive behavior and make tomorrow better? So that accountability is important, and really being honest with ourselves, right? Now, then the thing I like to end the day with is gratitude. being grateful. And the reason that I like to make that the last piece is because it puts you in a good frame of mind for then going to bed and going to sleep. You're not worried about a lot of things. You're not, you've put yourself in a positive place, I guess is the way I would look at it. So that daily routine that we learn about in week 4 of the training in the excellent video titled, this the secret power of daily routines, is really important. And that's where I would start. That's the basis that I would put people on when we're talking about building a plan.
Les, you knew, when we've talked many times, I was a certified financial planner for almost 20 years. And one of the concepts that guys would talk about in investing was something called the velocity of money. When you said gratitude at night and that it created, at the very least, a better sleep for you, I really thought about how what you're sharing today, what Fortify shares, we sometimes think, well, I'm going to go to Fortify to work on my recovery. Well, that makes total sense. But I've had guys ask me over the years, gee, how long is this going to take? Mm-hmm. And the principles that you're sharing right now, just the idea of daily self-care, daily routine, gratitude, if we use that as an investment or a dollar, and we invested that our time in doing something where maybe it's a gratitude list. I don't know if you do yours mentally or on a piece of paper or both, but if I make that investment, it touches so many other things. Gee, I have a better night's sleep without mom and dad telling me I got to go to bed. Yeah. I have a better night's sleep. And there's not one study that's ever been done on quality sleep versus non-quality sleep that doesn't show other tentacles that reach out to improve the quality of our life. Yeah. This isn't what you're sharing today. I hope the members understand this isn't just about, it'll help me stop porn, it'll help me stop porn. Expand the view. This helps me stop porn because the quality of my life is so dramatically increased that the old feeling of needing to medicate rapidly disappears or disappears over time. And so you can call it recovery, but some of us are wanting to call it quality of life or life quality. And so gratitude at night, we see that as I'll do my gratitude list to be grateful. But boy, when you start thinking about the velocity, the magnification of well-being in your life, just in that one exercise, as the financial planner would say, boy, that's where I want to put my money. That's where I want to invest my efforts, are things that magnify where I get a nice return on my investment. So keep going.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think what we sometimes fail to understand, at least early on, is that what we're talking about is lifestyle change. We're talking about eliminating negative things and adding positive things. We're talking about a different approach and a different view of life in general. And so, yes, we want to overcome pornography. Yes, that's our goal. But there's so much more that it impacts. So that's it. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with a daily routine is there's something that I would like to suggest to everyone. And that is that you find an activity or a hobby that engages your brain. And when I talk about that, what I mean is finding something that is probably complicated, that takes all of your mental focus. For example, when I retired, I probably should say when I semi-retired, I took up playing the guitar. I'd always wanted to learn to play the guitar. It was something that I had never done, but it's kind of always been on my list. I love music. Music's always been important to me. But what I find with that activity is when I pick up my guitar and I go to a piece of music and the left hand is fingering strings and the right hand is either plucking strings or strum patterns, and the eyes are reading music and notes and words, and the voice is singing and keeping time and all of those things. There's no room in here for anything else. There's no room in here for negative thoughts. There's no room in here for self-doubt. There's no room in here for thoughts of porn or anything else. It's like hitting a reset button for me. So my suggestion is, as part of your daily routine, before we move off of that subject, is find something that you can dedicate yourself to. Maybe it's learning a new language. Maybe it's writing the next great novel. Maybe it's, doing mathematical equations to figure out the, basis of the universe. I don't know what it is. And I don't know that the activity really makes as much difference as it's something that just totally engages your brain to where you can, for 10, 15, 20 minutes, be totally involved with something, because it really is like hitting a reset button.
Well, and don't forget, you brought it up earlier when you talked about the sort of the difference in the language between being clean and or sobriety and recovery.
Mm-hmm.
That one, you used Josh's expression of the white knuckling. The white knuckling is the abstinence, but there's not a replacement of a new behavior. There's no new renter coming into my brain to take up space there, and so I'm no, la 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 la. I'm in that avoidance stage,
right,
which again can get me through for minutes, hours, days, maybe weeks, maybe even months, but ultimately it's a little bit of a trick. I will not find long-term sobriety if I don't replace it. So your guitar lessons, how long have you been working on the mathematical equations of the universe, by the way?
Maybe 10 seconds last week.
Yeah.
Until I got a headache and then I quit. So, I keep my guitar pick here on my desk, to remind me. But and the fact that I'm a lousy guitar player has nothing to do with anything, really. It's just I do recommend that people try to find something that they can really, really focus on. So this is our basis, right? So we built a foundation now. If we're doing self-care, if we're doing these things that put us into a good place, because I think we just need to understand when we're tired, when we don't feel well, when we're not eating right, we are vulnerable. We're vulnerable to temptations and to triggers and situations. So we want to put ourselves in the best place we possibly can. But I kind of want to transition just a little bit now and talk about tools.
Cool.
So, we talked about this tool a while ago, the white knuckle tool. But I often do this, and people that are in my groups, will recognize some of these things I'm going to talk about here. But so I say, let's compare recovery to something around our house. Let's say I have a leaky faucet in my house, and it's dripping, and it's driving me crazy because you hear that drip, drip, drip. Plus, it's making my water bill higher. So I'm going to go fix that faucet. I grab my toolbox, and I reach in my toolbox, and I pull out the only tool that's in there, and it's this little bitty screwdriver. Now, I can look at it and say, well, okay, I'm going to go attack that faucet with this screwdriver. But my odds of really being successful in fixing that leak are probably pretty slim with this particular tool. So recognizing that we don't always have the right tools, that's why we come to some place like Fortify. So where do we get our tools? So we run down to Tool Depot or Recovery Mart, or we go to Fortify, and we say, gosh, how do I learn about tools? Well, the Fortify training is chock full of tools. I love the Fortify training, and I think it's something that everyone should do at least once, maybe twice, because there's so much in it that you're going to learn. Not only are you going to begin to understand what's going on in your brain and in your body that causes this thing, but you're gonna find some practical things that you can use. And so we're going to talk about some of those things as we talk about tools. We've just, in our daily self-care, in our healthy routine, we talked about some tools. Meditation, recovery work, connection, accountability. Those are all tools that we have as well. So we don't want to forget those. But here's a suggestion. So here's a little, I'll call it a process that I like to suggest that people go through. This worked well for me, and I like to share it with people. So I'm going to hold this up. Hopefully you can see it. It's a little 3-column form. It's very simple. What you do with this is in the left-hand column, the first column, you write down the situation, the trigger, the urge, whatever you want to call it. And you be as specific as you can, but we're going to stay at a high level today. So let's say we write down stress. This is one I hear a lot, stress. Mm-hmm. I come home from work and I'm stressed. I come home from school and I'm stressed. My relationship's stressed. I'm stressed with my family. I'm stressed with finances. I'm stressed. So let's write down stress in this column. The middle column, the second column, we put down how we respond in a negative fashion in our addiction. So we might write down, for example, I'm going to sit in front of the computer and I'm going to look at porn and I'm going to act out sexually. But that's not the only way that we respond negatively to an addiction, even like stress. Maybe we write down, I isolate myself. I build a bubble. I don't connect. I withdraw. Or maybe I get angry. Maybe I get frustrated. Maybe I have negative emotions that come out in other types of activities. Sure. But we have to be honest with ourselves here in what we do. And then in the right-hand column, the third column, we write down how we want to respond in a healthy fashion. So this is where our plan begins to develop, and this is where our tools become important. So in our discussion of stress, what tools do we have in our toolkit other than this that will help us with stress? Well, let's look at our daily routine and see what's there. Oh, look, there's exercise. Exercise is good for stress. So I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to work out. Well, if your life's anything like mine and I'm doing that for stress, I'm going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in a few weeks. No, not really. But, so exercise is one. Well, are there others, though? Meditation, perhaps. Music, reading, prayer, scriptures. Depending on who we are, and depending on our situation, some of those things may work. But there's other things as well. So again, we talked about some of the fortify things. So I wrote down, and I'm just going to kind of run through this huge list here, so bear with me. So if I'm looking for things to help me deal with stress in a positive manner, here are some things that I can consider. Training, coaching, groups, the tracker and Fortify, community. Maybe some things in the additional resources that Fortify is so kind to put on their website. Webinars, maybe I can go look at a webinar. The STAR method, urge surfing, bouncing the eyes, visualization, allies, watching our thoughts. Or how about laughter or celebration? We talked about gratitude a while ago. Maybe we couple that with gratitude and we put breathing, we can do gratitude breathing. Understanding the addiction cycle, understanding choice points, and willpower. Now, those are just a few that I've thrown in there in addition to all the stuff that we had up at the front part. So what we do is we write in that right-hand column all the things that we think might work. And I would suggest to you that you might have one thing in this column and a couple things in this column and a whole bunch of stuff in this column. And that is absolutely perfectly fine. Because what we have to do next is we have to kind of figure out what works when and under what circumstances. Writing it down has a lot of power. It makes sense. Go ahead, Vinny. You were going to say something.
No. Well, first of all, I wanted you to say the act of writing it down can be magic. It's one thing to think it. I'll ponder that. But when you write it down, studies have shown, they're out there, Google, and there is a connection that our hands and a pen, and frankly, it's been shown it's not quite as strong typing. But literally, the old pen and pencil on a piece of paper, it's like there's a circuit that goes from the tip of the finger to the parts of the brain that remember what you wrote down. So don't want to minimize the importance of that.
Well, absolutely.
But you're also hearing words like practice and plan. What a
So,
surprise. Has something to do with your message
yeah,
today.
what a surprise. Well, the other thing that it does, so let's say I did this exercise and I did it on stress and I wrote down my options over here. And 2 or 3 days from now, I come home and I'm feeling really stressed. Well, if I pick up this piece of paper and I read through my options and my suggestions, I might find something there that I'm willing to try that I want to work on that maybe is going to work in my stressful situation. So having a copy of this that we can refer to later is very important. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit more. So let's get a little bit more specific. So let's say I wrote down 10 things. Life is interesting, and everybody's different, and every day is different, every situation is different. So what worked for me today may not work for me tomorrow. So for example, I went to the gym today and I worked out and I felt pretty good when I finished, and it helped me get past that stress and over that situation. But tomorrow I can't go to the gym for whatever reason. Maybe the gym's closed. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's a blizzard and the streets are whatever. I can't go to the gym. What can I do? What else on my list can I try? So I suggest to people that after you've done the exercise of writing things down, you experiment a little. Experimenting kind of is a dangerous word, perhaps, when we're talking to people about things, but experiment a little bit with what works and what doesn't. Because ultimately what we want to get to is a situation where we have a plan for every specific trigger that we can identify. So when I'm stressed, I don't want to do this. I want to do this. Now, once you've kind of narrowed down the choices and found the 2 or 3 top things that are going to work for you, that are your go-to tools, then comes in the practice part. So there's a section in the training called the practicing mind. And there's a story in there about obviously a very intelligent fellow who practiced every day how he was going to respond to triggers as things went on. I won't tell you who that guy was. But anyway, in the morning, getting ready for work, showering, shaving, doing the things that you normally do, visualize and repeat in your mind, if I get stressed today, I'm going to respond this way, over and over and over again. Now, this is a pretty broad, when we talk stress, that's a pretty broad topic, but hopefully you'll understand the thing that I'm trying to say here is we want to practice the positive response to a negative stimulus until it becomes muscle memory, until it becomes the autopilot. How many times do we find we go on autopilot and oops, I had a setback. Oops, I had a slip. Oh my gosh, how'd this happen? I was just on autopilot and going through life. Well, if we're going to go on autopilot, and all of us will at some point, we want that autopilot to go to a positive place, not to a negative place. So just like training to do something from an athletic perspective, or training like soldiers do, or police officers or firemen do, when you get in a stressful situation, the training takes over and there are positive results. That's what we want to do. So practice absolutely is important. The outcome will be based on the amount of effort and work that we put into it. And I think that's true with everything, right? I often use sports metaphors. So I tell people, if I think of recovery as running a marathon, and it is a marathon, not a sprint, I don't get up out of my easy chair and go run 26 miles. I would probably make it 26 steps, have a heart attack, and die. So that's not right. I have to have a plan. I have to practice. I have to work up to it. So what I do, the same thing with recovery. I have built my daily routine, my self-care. I've begun to look at my triggers, and we sometimes use the word trigger, I think, a little too broadly, but I look at my negative influences. I've started to work on how I'm going to respond to them. And the I guess the metamorphosis of this plan is we start, if I can use the word, in a defensive position, and we want to move towards a more offensive position. And I don't mean by being offensive, but taking actions. So let me use another example with our little 3-part form here. I think we've got enough time. Tell me if we don't. But
keep going.
So let's say our trigger is boredom. And when we're bored, we sit down in front of the computer and we start aimlessly and mindlessly clicking and wandering around looking for something. We're not looking for porn, but we're looking for something that's exciting, entertaining, whatever, engaging. And we click and we click and we click and all of a sudden, lo and behold, looky there. That's interesting. I wonder if I can find any more pictures. And before we know it, we find ourselves at a porn site. Again, that's what we've trained our brains to do. So from a defensive perspective, perhaps what we do is we write down, gee, when I'm bored or I have too much time on the internet, I act out by aimlessly wandering around until I end up, at a porn site. So what is our planned action, the thing we want to do? Perhaps we take a defensive measure and we say, I'm going to put a filter on my computer. That filter will keep me from going to that porn site. That's good. We need that. I preach to people that we need a safe place, a place where we can catch our breath, a place where we can think. We need to fortify our home. We need to use filters, blockers, accountability software, screen time on your phones, whatever works for you. There are many, many opportunities. And guess where we learn about those? Oh yeah, the Fortify training. There's a lot of that in there too. So we start in a defensive perspective, but the truth of the matter is we can't live consistently in a defensive posture. We can't always stay hunkered down behind our walls and rely on our filters and blockers to always work and to keep us safe, because sometimes they're going to fail and sometimes something's going to happen. So what we begin to need to do is, instead of just fighting the darkness, we need to bring in light to dispel the darkness. We need to begin to fight smarter, not harder. Oh yeah, that's in the Fortify training too. We need to find good things to replace those negative things. So yes, filters are there, but maybe what I need to decide I'm going to do is I'm only going to go on the internet when I have a purpose for going on the internet. I'm going to be targeted in my approach to being online. I'm not going to wander around aimlessly, because I've discovered that can be dangerous. And yeah, I've got filters. That's wonderful. But I'm going to take the approach that when I need to go onto my banking site and pay a bill, I'm going to go pay that bill and I'm going to get the heck off. When I need to go research something for work or for school, I'll get on, I'll research it, I'll go to that site, and then I'll get off. Now, that's taking a positive action that will definitely bear fruit, because if you do that, the odds of you stumbling across something is pretty slim. It also can feel restrictive. And I'm sure there are people out there saying, wait a minute, I can't live without the internet. I can't live without social media. And I'm not anti those things, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand. What I'm saying is, be intelligent about what we're doing. And if we find our triggers, our negative situations on the internet or on social media, we need to figure out a smarter way to utilize those tools in a healthier, safer fashion. So we begin to move from the defensive into more of the offensive. Now I'm going to change the way I interact with the internet. I'm going to change the way I use social media. I'm going to change the way that I live my life, dare I say. That makes any sense?
Something that's screaming out to me is a therapeutic term that I've heard for years and years. I heard it 25 years ago from the first therapist I ever dealt with. The decision before the decision. Maybe our members, maybe you guys have heard that a lot. Some probably haven't heard it all. But when I tried to stop all those years ago, from the time I was a youngster until into my 40s, I was always trying to stop looking at porn when I was looking at porn. What I hear you saying, Les, is that if we're going to have success intervening, taking a different path, I got to make that decision before I get to the trigger, the temptation, whatever the term we want to use. If I make that choice, a choice point, why not make the choice point, if in metaphorically speaking, miles before I get to the crossroads, as opposed to I'm at the crossroads, what do I do? You're talking, I'm a Boy Scout. How about be prepared? And that's everything that you're saying is about preparation, so that I'm prepared in advance. I know what to do today. I walk by the magazine rack at Kroger's. Boom. I've already made my choice weeks, months, maybe years before. But because I practiced it, it was right there, as you and I call it, and others, the tool belt.
Right.
My tools are in place.
And it's an automatic response. That's what we're going to get to. But, there's a lot of work that goes into that. So, part of what we, when we talked about our stress as our trigger, as our write down, maybe we'll take just a minute and kind of delve in a little bit deeper there. So all of us know, I think, that stress really isn't a trigger. Stress is a bucket that gets filled up during the course of the day or the week. Stress is an outcome. It's a symptom. So if we really want to be successful with this plan that we're talking about and understanding how to respond to it, maybe we need to break down stress just a little bit more. So what is it that's causing us to feel this thing we call stress? And then the answer is going to be different for everyone. So if we are looking at, maybe it's financial stress, maybe it's relationship stress, maybe it's school stress, maybe it's, I don't know. But we need to start breaking that down a little bit into a little bit more manageable bite. And so we look at it and we say, all right, what's causing me stress is my boss told me tomorrow we were going to have a meeting and he was going to give me some constructive criticism. Oh, how I hate that constructive criticism. That causes me stress. It causes my hair to fall out. And you can see I've had quite a bit of constructive criticism. So understanding now that I've got a specific situation that causes me stress, right? Not just the general stress of life. I got a specific situation. So how do I deal with that specific situation? I've got to go to work tomorrow and I've got to face my boss, and he's going to share with me all the things I'm doing wrong in life and how much smarter he is than I am. And I catastrophize and I think, oh, I'm going to end up getting fired because I'm worthless. I'm lousy. I never should have even taken this job. It'd been better if I hadn't been born. We get wrapped up into this thing, and yes, it's stress, but it's a very specific point, a very specific type of stress. So we have to make some decisions as we do some analysis on this. How am I going to do this? We are going to, we're going to use some of our tools. We're going to figure out which ones work, and we're going to apply those. I'm not going to allow myself. So maybe in this case, I go into my boss's office with a little bit of white knuckle, a little bit of willpower. I'm not going to allow him to push me over the edge, over that cliff. I'm not going to respond in that negative way. I'm going to force my way through it. I'm going to white knuckle through it. I'm going to listen to what he says. I'm sure there'll be at least one nugget in there that is worth listening to, but I'm not going to take it personally. I'm going to take the approach that he's looking at me to try to help. And I can improve. All of us can. None of us are perfect. So we figure out a way that we deal with that specific stress point, and we write it down, and we practice it, and then we survive it, and we then analyze it and say, how did we do? Was I less stressed this time than the last time I got constructive criticism? And if I was, guess what? That's a success, and that's progress. Now, the other thing I want to talk about, and the guys in my group will know exactly what I'm going to say. We need to recognize progress, and we need to recognize success, and we need to celebrate success. Sometimes, again, visualization here. So recovery is a mountain, and it's a very steep mountain, and we're climbing this mountain. And when we're climbing this mountain using hands and feet, our view is about 12 inches out here, and it's all dirt and rocks and weeds. And that's all we see. It's hard to see the progress, even though we can tell we're moving, we're climbing, we're working really hard. But if we can find a little bit of a level place and we can turn around and we can look out over the valley and we can look back down the mountain and we can go, wow, we've made some progress. Wow. No, I'm not to the top of the mountain yet. No, I'm not perfect yet. I still struggle, but look, I can see my progress. I can see where I've come from. I can see how much I've done. That is so important in reinforcing the things that we're doing with our plans and understanding our triggers and looking for the positive ways to respond to this stuff. It's so important to recognize that we are making progress. We often, speaking to myself as well as everybody else, we often don't give ourselves enough credit. We often don't think that we're making much, if any, in the way of progress. And I can't tell you how many times someone has come to me and said, "Oh man, I had a bad week. I had a setback, and I'm back to square one. I'm back to zero." No, you're not back to zero. No, you're not back to square one. Okay, we had a problem. We had a setback. That didn't negate all of your progress that you've made, or all the things that you've learned, and all the work you've put in. But what you've got to do now is you've got to analyze what happened. Where did your plan fail? Was it a defensive failure? Was it an offensive failure? Did your tool not work? Did you not try to use your tool? Did you not try to implement? We really have to, again, being honest with ourselves and working through that and understanding what happened, and then patching that plan, putting a new tool, running back down to Recovery Mart and buying another tool. That's what we need to do to fix that. But recognizing that. On the other hand, we come out of our boss's office after that wonderful little situation that we just went through, and we don't feel like running to the nearest computer and acting out, or whatever the situation may be. Doggone it, that's a success. I made it through. What am I going to do to reward my success? To remind my brain, you did some good stuff. Well, maybe I go get an ice cream cone. Maybe I go to a movie. Maybe I go download that new album or that new song that I've been wanting to put on my phone. Again, it's not the activity that's important, it's the action. So just like it's that activity that we talked about earlier of engaging the brain and really something you can really focus on, it's not the activity, it's the action. It's the same thing with that, recognizing progress and rewarding ourselves for good behavior, reinforcing the good behavior, reminding our brain that good behavior gets rewards as well. I think that's something that we sometimes fail to give ourselves credit for.
It's interesting that you brought up the rewarding yourself for good behavior, because in our group last night, that was the sort of the topic and center of our discussion, was this idea. And I used as an example someone who has posted for years on a forum and wrote daily. I'm on day 89 of, I'm going for 120, and he'd make it to 119. And then there was a post, day 120, didn't make it. I'm a loser. I'm a piece of garbage, and totally self-loathing, and which sadly only sets him up for the very next slip or relapse, with no recognition of those 119 days. And I wrote him a letter. I asked him for two things. I said, first of all, let me know. I said, how did you feel for the 119 days? You may not have said you're free from porn, but you were certainly abstinent. How did it feel? And of course, he wrote how wonderful he felt. But I said, I'd like to do an experiment. And the experiment was, he had posted for almost 3 years. I think he had 3, maybe 4 slips in a 12-month period. Never once was there a lot of posts from other people saying, way to go, man, I wish I was where you were. But how many guys on the planet would we classify as porn addicts or porn compulsives who actually viewed porn 3 times during a year? Now, again, we all have different standards. I want to be completely free. We talk about, being done with this, with these behaviors. But how many of us listening, you could all post right now if you'd like to, how many of us listening would give just about anything to say, man, I did porn 3 times a year, March, August, November. A lot of us would be saying, I'd give anything to be in his position.
Yeah.
No recognition for the 362 days where he was not looking at porn. Was he fighting it? Perhaps. But even so, the victory was there. I didn't give in. Oops, I gave in 3 times. I thank you for mentioning that, Les, because it's a big deal.
Well, it is.
I'm well versed in beating myself up. I am not well versed in giving myself a pat on the back.
Exactly. None of us are. And I think it's important that we have a measure of success. We have some method of measuring our progress. I do think that's important. I'm not sure counting days is necessarily the right way to do it. But when we fall short of that measure, whatever it is, we can't allow ourselves, easy to say, hard to do, can't allow ourselves to go into the shame cycle. I recommend highly to anyone listening Holly's webinar on getting past the 2 to 3 week hurdle for good. She gives some excellent things in there about what she calls a bounce back plan. And I have shamelessly plagiarized that many times, and some of the things that she lists there, and how we bounce back from a slip, a setback, a failure, whatever word we want to use. Yeah. It's so important that we get up and dust ourselves off, that we get back in the game, and not allow ourselves to sit and allow that to do that. So that's part of understanding, recognizing the progress, recognizing the success. That's part of that bounce back plan to me. So the fact that I did well this week doesn't necessarily guarantee that I'll do well next week. However, by recognizing that I've done well this week, I put myself in a better position. So if something that bad does happen, hopefully I won't beat myself up and allow myself to slip into a 2 or 3 week cycle of, whatever, that I'll be able to pull myself out quickly, analyze what happened, make some changes and some fixes to my plans and to my routines and the things where I feel that perhaps there was a weakness, and get back with it and get back on it and get back on that progress track.
Les, I don't know how, of course, and you know this in your group, I know it in my group, you start group and all of a sudden it's time to end group. And we look back and say, where'd the time go?
Yep.
We've got about 6 or 7 minutes. I want to get my drum set out, do a big drum roll. Take over for whatever. Will you come back? I've asked that of a couple of our guests. You're giving so much practical advice. Can we make a part 2 out of this for down the road?
I suppose I could be interested in something. In full transparency, this is not comfortable, but yes, if what we talk about and talking about these practical things, if we can help one person listening out there, if one person leaves this today and says, wow, I learned something that I think will be helpful, then it's worth being a little uncomfortable for. So yes, I will come back and we'll do a part 2 and we'll figure out what we're going to talk about when we get there.
I'd invite our attendees, even though we can't necessarily remark about it at the moment. I'd love you to put down, if you heard one thing in this last 54 minutes, if you heard one thing or more that helped you, write that down. Say, yeah, I liked hearing about this, or I liked hearing about that. How do you want to close out our visit today, Les?
Boy, that's a good question. I guess I want to encourage people to really utilize the tools and the resources that are available on Fortify. One of the things that we didn't talk about much today is the community.
Yeah.
And I want to be cautious of confidentiality here, but I can tell you that I have people that I coach whom I have suggested to them that they go on the community, that they make some connection, that perhaps they help people, or perhaps they just post about their concerns or their issues. And I have gotten feedback about how positively that has impacted them, that the connections that are made on the community are very good for them. I don't Unfortunately, I don't spend as much time responding to posts on the community as I used to. I still try occasionally, but it becomes a time issue and where you spend your time. But I suggest people to explore the things that are available. The community is wonderful. And the thing that just blows me away is when a new person comes on, new to Fortify. I'm brand new, don't know what to do. Here I am, first time. And it seems like immediately half a dozen, 8, 10 people reach out and respond to that person and say, welcome, you're in the right place. Here's what you have to go through the training. Look at this, do this. There's just so much tremendous support there that I hope we aren't isolating ourselves from our own participants and our brothers and our sisters that are here with us to do that. So I would encourage that, as well as, yeah, I know I've mentioned the training a half a dozen times through here, but I'm really a proponent of the training. I think if you would spend a little bit of time going through that every day, you're going to learn some things that are going to be helpful. You're going to hear some of the stuff we've talked about today, but you're going to find some new stuff in there that maybe you haven't heard about, and maybe it will make a difference. So avail yourself of the platform and of the tools and of the things that are there. Consider joining a group if that sounds like something. Groups are fabulous. I love my groups. Maybe consider engaging with a coach if that seems to be something that might be helpful.
Les, you and I go back a long ways, and I've had the privilege of having you here, having you in our home, having you at Fortify along with your sweetheart. We've had a couple of nice dinners and some functions together. You are in that group of guys that we say gets it. You do get it, and you've lived to tell about it. I would like to invite you back, and I want to thank you so much for being here. I'm already seeing comments come in. I learned this. Thank you for those comments. And by the way, remember, those of you that are either watching now or will be watching this on a replay, the thread with the comments stays open. And if you have a question, something you want to ask Les, both of us will come back in and answer your questions as we're able to, but you'll see the string of thread will continue. So even though the webinar concludes, you can keep posting on this webinar and ask questions. As we conclude, I want to just again make a reminder for those that have joined us. Next week, I'll be with Coach Holly doing the Fortified Chat. Be Wednesday at 12 Mountain Time again. But the following week on Wednesday night here in the U.S., Wednesday night, June 5th at 7 p.m., our beloved Raisha will be talking about sort of some things about the spouse piece, emotional intimacy and emotional maturity and communication. We had a technical difficulty or two that prevented the replay, and so she's consented amidst all of the challenges that she's been through for the last 90 days. She's consented to come back, and we're excited to test a new time. It won't be permanent unless we see some increase, but we're thinking maybe it's more accessible to do our webinars in the evening, and this will be our first time in a couple of years we've done it that late. So put that on your calendar, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Les, big hugs to your sweetie Karma, and thank you so much for being here today. Love you lots, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, members, for being here. Really appreciate you. And good luck and continued success on your journey to find freedom from this behavior that causes some real challenges in our lives. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
one.